We like to think the legal system is built on logic, reason, and centuries of philosophical debate. But honestly, half the rulebook was hastily duct-taped together because one absolute legend completely lacked basic common sense. Whenever you see a warning sign so hyper-specific it makes your brain hurt, just know there is a spectacularly stupid story behind it. Today, we are exposing certain individuals who have prompted the drafting of new laws. 1. In 1913, the United States Postal Service had to officially outlaw the mailing of human beings, all thanks to a couple named Jesse and Matilda Beagle. When the parcel post service was introduced, it was designed to help farmers ship heavy goods affordably. But the Beagles realized that mailing their 8-month-old son to his grandmother's house cost just 15 cents in stamps, which was significantly cheaper than buying him a train ticket. They actually handed their baby over to a mail carrier. The stunt quickly caught on, forcing the Postmaster General to issue a strict, formal regulation stating that children do not qualify as mail. 2. Fast food drive-through lanes are strictly built for motorized vehicles, a fundamental concept that completely eluded one highly equestrian-minded customer in Greater Manchester. In 2013, an incredibly stubborn woman named Christine Brooks completely shocked restaurant employees when she confidently rode her massive horse right up to the ordering window. When the staff understandably refused to serve her for obvious safety reasons, she angrily marched the animal directly inside the actual restaurant, where it promptly defecated on the floor. Police issued her severe fines, and the massive fast food corporation was forced to immediately enforce a strict, new corporate rule, explicitly banning all horses and riders from utilizing their drive-through lanes globally. 3. The Son of Sam law is a famous piece of American legislation that physically prevents criminals from cashing in on their own notoriety. It exists entirely because of the infamous serial killer David Berkowitz. After his capture in 1977, publishers began offering him massive amounts of money for the exclusive rights to his story. The idea that a murderer could become a wealthy celebrity from a jail cell caused massive public outrage. The New York State Legislature rapidly drafted a law explicitly allowing the state to seize any money earned by criminals from the sale of their stories, ensuring the funds go directly to victim compensation instead. 4. Keeping years of old newspapers in your living room is a bad habit. But for two incredibly reclusive brothers in New York, it fundamentally changed urban fire safety. By 1947, Homer and Langley Collier had filled their massive Manhattan brownstone with over 100 tons of garbage, creating endless floor-to-ceiling mazes rigged with elaborate booby traps. Tragically, they both lost their lives when they became permanently trapped beneath the crushing weight of their own massive collection. Because their extreme living situation posed such an unprecedented, deadly hazard to emergency responders, the fire department officially created new safety codes and permanently adopted the term Collier's Mansion to classify severe hoarding hazards. 5. Standing at an airport check-in desk, Ryan Carney Williams decided he was not going to pay British Airways' excess baggage fee. His master plan was to simply wear his entire wardrobe at once. He physically put on 8 pairs of heavy trousers and 10 thick shirts, looking like a massive, deeply uncomfortable marshmallow. Instead of respecting his frugality, the airline immediately denied him boarding and instituted a strict new security protocol on the spot. Aviation authorities legally backed the airline, creating an ironclad rule that explicitly bans the extreme layering of luggage to bypass baggage weight limits. He was literally arrested at the terminal for refusing to undress. 6. Buying professional medical equipment for your house is completely illegal in California, and you can entirely blame Hollywood actor Tom Cruise for it. In 2006, while his wife Katie Holmes was pregnant, Cruise decided it would be fun to buy his own commercial-grade ultrasound machine to watch the baby at home. The medical community was absolutely horrified that a celebrity without a medical license was blasting a fetus with unmonitored sound waves. This specific, highly publicized celebrity purchase directly forced the California state legislature to pass a strict law making it illegal to sell or use professional sonogram machines without a valid medical license. 7. The National Park Service has had to issue aggressively specific warnings about not kidnapping the local wildlife. In 2016, Two tourists visiting Yellowstone National Park spotted a baby bison and decided it looked a little too cold in the snow. Their brilliant solution? They caught the calf, picked it up, and locked it in the back of their SUV to warm it up. The tourists literally drove to a ranger station demanding help for the freezing animal. Rangers were forced to heavily fine the men and issue public statements reminding visitors that wild bison are perfectly equipped for winter and do not require vehicular rescue. 8. Most people build a simple wooden deck or a small shed in their backyard, but John Ivers had significantly grander ambitions. In the early 2000s, this incredibly determined Indiana resident decided to weld together a fully functioning, wildly dangerous metal roller coaster entirely on his own property, complete with a massive, terrifying loop. He called it the Blue Flash. Local city planners were absolutely stunned. Their residential zoning books completely lacked any guidelines for unauthorized amateur amusement parks sitting next to a neighbor's fence. His insane DIY project forced local municipal governments to scramble and draft hyper-specific building codes, strictly outlawing the construction of high-speed thrill rides in the suburbs. 9. Keeping farm animals inside your bathroom is already a highly questionable life choice. But one man in Arizona managed to turn it into a municipal nightmare. In 1924, a merchant in the town of Kingman allowed his beloved pet donkey to regularly sleep inside an abandoned cast-iron bathtub resting in his yard. Disaster struck when a local dam suddenly burst, unleashing a massive flood. The sleeping donkey was swept away, turning the heavy tub into a makeshift boat as it floated miles down the raging canyon. The town was forced to drop absolutely everything to mount a massive, highly dangerous rescue operation to save the stranded beast. Furious at the severe waste of time and resources, the local council immediately passed a hyper-specific law officially making it illegal to allow a donkey to sleep in a bathtub. 10. If you have ever seen a wildly exaggerated television commercial that features a tiny legal disclaimer at the bottom stating, "Not a real offer," you can thank a man named John Leonard. In 1996, Pepsi ran a promotional campaign jokingly offering a military Harrier fighter jet for 7 million Pepsi points. They never expected anyone to take it seriously. But Leonard realized it was mathematically cheaper to just buy the points for $700,000. So he mailed them a check and demanded his jet. The resulting legal battle forced advertisers everywhere to add disclaimers so no one else would try to legally claim military aircraft from a soda company. Do you think he really believed he would get a fighter jet in the mail? 11. The quiet dignity of the American judicial system was completely destroyed by the invention of the flashbulb. During the 1935 kidnapping trial of Bruno Hauptmann, the media circus reached a fever pitch. Hundreds of aggressively competitive photographers swarmed the courtroom, constantly setting off blinding, explosive flashes that completely derailed the serious legal proceedings. The presiding judges and legal experts were so profoundly annoyed by the chaotic environment that they took sweeping action. The American Bar Association officially adopted Canon 35, a strict nationwide rule that completely banned all cameras and live broadcasting equipment from federal courtrooms for several decades. 12. Airline regulations experienced a profoundly absurd update in 2018, entirely thanks to a Brooklyn-based artist known as Ventico. She calmly strolled into Newark Liberty International Airport, accompanied by her emotional support animal, which was not a small dog, but a massive, fully grown squawking peacock named Dexter. She had even bought the bird its own ticket. United Airlines firmly denied them boarding, and the ensuing media circus forced the federal government to officially rewrite the rules, strictly limiting service animals to well-behaved canines. What kind of emotional support does a giant bird actually provide? 13. Let's talk about parking enforcement. Usually, a ticket on your windshield means you stayed too long at a meter. But for Tony Letham in 2003, parking enforcement completely froze. Why? Because the vehicle he left on a quiet London street was a 34-ton military tank. He legally bought it, drove it home, and parked it in a residential zone. When the city tried to tow it, they discovered their municipal codes only applied to cars and trucks. The sheer audacity of treating a weapon of war like a Honda Civic forced lawmakers to specifically ban armored battle tanks from residential street parking. 14. Corporate terms of service rarely need to address the paranormal, until an enterprising user named Martin forced an online auction giant to heavily revise its legal rules. In 2010, this eccentric Indiana resident decided to make some quick cash by auctioning off a ghost trapped inside a glass jar on eBay. The bidding surprisingly skyrocketed past $50,000, completely baffling site administrators. To avoid the absolute legal nightmare of a furious buyer claiming they received an empty jar instead of a legitimate specter, eBay immediately banned the sale of all intangible items, souls, and ghosts. 15. Online dating profiles were directly responsible for a piece of actual state legislation passed by the New York Assembly in 2014. At the time, men were flooding dating apps with photos of themselves posing next to heavily sedated tigers at traveling carnivals, believing it made them look adventurous. Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal drafted a bill specifically targeting these tiger selfie guys. The resulting law strictly banned all direct contact between the public and big cats, making it a criminal offense to hug a deadly predator just to get a few extra swipes on your smartphone. 16. Environmental conservation laws in South America literally had to be rewritten because a notorious cartel leader wanted a highly exotic petting zoo. Back in the 80s, Pablo Escobar illegally imported 4 massive African hippopotamuses to his private estate in Colombia. After his downfall, the animals were simply left behind. They thrived in the tropical climate, multiplying into a highly aggressive herd of over 100 massive beasts roaming the rivers. The Colombian government was forced to legally declare the African hippo an invasive toxic species, entirely because of one criminal's bizarre shopping habits. 17. Naming a newborn child is usually a joyous, deeply personal choice, unless you happen to live in France and possess a strange obsession with hazelnut spread. In 2015, a French couple attempted to officially register their baby girl under the legal name Nutella. The local registrar was so utterly disturbed by this decision that they took the parents straight to family court. A judge formally ruled that the name would lead to severe lifelong bullying and legally ordered the parents to rename the child Ella. It set a massive legal precedent, allowing the state to ban corporate brand names for humans. 18. I feel 20 years younger, so I should legally be 20 years younger. That was the actual, dead-serious legal argument of a Dutchman named Emil Ratelband in 2018. Furious that his real age was ruining his chances on Tinder, he petitioned a federal court to biologically rewind his birth certificate. The court system was absolutely paralyzed by the sheer audacity of this request. Judges had to formally issue a ruling stating that age, unlike a name, is tied to strict societal obligations like voting and pensions, permanently blocking people from legally identifying as a younger version of themselves. 19. The United States government officially owns the sky exactly 83 feet above your roof. This hyper-specific boundary wasn't created by aviation experts, but by a furious North Carolina farmer named Thomas Lee Cosby in 1945. Cosby lived near a military airfield, and low-flying bombers were terrifying his farm animals so badly that his chickens were literally dying of stress. He sued the federal government for trespassing in his personal airspace and miraculously won. The Supreme Court had to urgently invent a brand new law explicitly defining where private property ends and public airspace begins, all because one man wanted the military to stop bothering his poultry. 20. The restricted airspace around the most secure residence in the United States was forever altered because a government employee had a few too many drinks. In 2015, Sean Usman got heavily intoxicated and decided to fly his brand new quadcopter drone from his apartment balcony. He quickly lost control, and the machine crashed directly onto the lawn of the White House, triggering an absolutely massive Secret Service lockdown. Because of his reckless flying, the manufacturer was forced to permanently hard-code unalterable geofencing software into every single drone they sell. Are you really surprised they took it that far? 21. A casual joke about dinner toppings rarely triggers an international political crisis, unless you are the president of Iceland. In 2017, President Gudni Johannesson was answering casual questions at a local high school when he jokingly admitted that if he had the absolute power to do so, he would legally ban pineapple on pizza. The global media took the quote completely out of context, sparking massive outrage and a hilarious diplomatic meltdown. The situation escalated so quickly that the president had to issue a formal, official statement clarifying the constitutional limits of his office. He had to publicly reassure the world that a president cannot arbitrarily ban pizza toppings, even if they deeply despise the flavor. 22. Energy drink advertisements had to undergo a massive corporate restructuring, all because a man named Benjamin Carruthers lacked a basic understanding of metaphors. In 2013, he formally sued the makers of Red Bull for false advertising after drinking the beverage for an entire decade. His main legal argument was shockingly literal. The drink never actually gave him physical wings, nor did it enhance his athletic performance. Rather than risk a drawn-out, unpredictable jury trial, the massive corporation settled for millions of dollars. Because of his absurdly literal interpretation, the company was legally forced to change their famous slogan spelling to avoid further ridiculous lawsuits. 23. Shipping the most valuable cursed gemstone on the planet should require an armored convoy and armed guards. But in 1958, a jeweler named Harry Winston decided that standard mail was perfectly fine. After donating the priceless Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institution, he simply wrapped it in plain brown paper, stuck $145 worth of standard postage stamps on the box, and handed it to a local mailman. The United States Postal Service had a collective panic attack when they realized an irreplaceable multi-million-dollar artifact was bouncing around in the back of a standard delivery truck. This terrifyingly casual shipment forced the post office to completely rewrite their maximum liability and specialized insurance protocols. 24. Proving that government bureaucracy is deeply flawed became the ultimate mission for an Australian man named John Keogh. In 2001, the country introduced an automated, streamlined system for registering new inventions. To expose how utterly useless the new vetting process was, Keogh submitted highly detailed schematics for a circular transportation facilitation device. The government blindly rubber-stamped the paperwork, officially granting him a legally binding patent for the wheel. The international embarrassment was so severe that the Australian Parliament was forced to completely overhaul their entire intellectual property system. 25. Paying your taxes is always frustrating, but a Virginia resident named Nick Stafford turned his minor inconvenience into a bureaucratic nightmare in 2017. Furious over a dispute regarding vehicle sales tax, he decided to legally pay his $3,000 bill entirely in pennies. Stafford hired people to unroll exactly 300,000 coins, loaded them into 5 massive wheelbarrows, and dumped nearly 1,600 pounds of copper at the local Department of Motor Vehicles. The poor clerks were legally required to count every single cent by hand, shutting down the office for hours. His petty stunt directly triggered new local policies heavily restricting the use of unrolled bulk coins for government payments. 26. If a television commercial shows a guy drinking a beer and instantly being surrounded by beautiful models on a tropical beach, we all know it is a joke. Richard Overton, however, demanded his models. In 1991, he sued a massive brewing company for false advertising, claiming he drank their beer, stayed exactly where he was, and suffered deep emotional distress. The lawsuit was instantly tossed, but the legal ripples were massive. It formally established the legal defense of Puffery, a permanent rule protecting companies from being sued over wildly obvious, comedic exaggerations in advertising. Have you ever taken a commercial this literally? 27. Ballot confusion reached a hilarious peak during a 1979 Louisiana election, entirely orchestrated by a highly cynical politician named Luther Divine Knox. Knowing that voters were overwhelmingly frustrated with the corrupt political establishment, he legally changed his formal, everyday name to none of the above. His brilliant strategy was to physically force his new legal name onto the ballot, theoretically capturing the vote of every single angry, undecided citizen in the state. The stunt was so dangerously effective that the state legislature panicked. They immediately passed a strict law permanently banning candidates from using deceptive or confusing names to manipulate the democratic process. 28. Setting a world record is usually an honor. But an incarcerated man named Jonathan Lee Riches forced the Guinness Book to legally alter their entire business model. Riches is famous for filing thousands of absurd lawsuits against everyone from pirates to the Eiffel Tower. In 2009, he caught a rumor that Guinness was planning to officially crown him the most litigious individual on Earth. Staying true to his absolute nature, he instantly filed a massive federal lawsuit against the record book just for considering it. To avoid getting bogged down in endless, frivolous court battles, Guinness executives enacted a permanent company policy banning any records related to excessive legal litigation. 29. Securing a spot at an Ivy League university requires flawless transcripts, but James Hogue decided to just invent a completely new human being instead. In the late 80s, this grown man created a fake identity as a self-educated orphan from a ranch, submitted entirely fabricated paperwork, and successfully gained full admission into Princeton University. He even joined the track team. When a former classmate recognized him at a sporting event, the massive deception completely humiliated the university's admissions board. Because one con artist successfully tricked his way into the world's most elite academic institution, universities nationwide were forced to drastically overhaul their background check laws, officially mandating rigorous identity verification for all incoming freshmen. 30. Across America, there are strict zoning laws preventing you from building a massive ugly wall just to annoy your neighbor. These are known as spite fence laws, and they largely exist because of a petty 19th century railroad tycoon named Charles Crocker. When a stubborn neighbor refused to sell a tiny plot of land that Crocker wanted for his massive mansion in San Francisco, the billionaire retaliated by building a gigantic, 40-foot-tall wooden wall entirely surrounding the neighbor's home, blocking out the sun completely. It was such a monumentally petty move that lawmakers eventually had to legally ban architectural spite. 31. Imagine renting a completely boring movie and accidentally changing federal law. In 1987, Supreme Court nominee Robert Bork was facing a tough confirmation battle. A highly invasive reporter decided to walk into Bork's local video store and managed to obtain a list of every single VHS tape the judge had ever rented. The reporter published the list in a newspaper, hoping for a juicy scandal. Instead, Congress was absolutely terrified that their own private movie habits could be leaked to the public. Driven by pure panic over one journalist's stunt, the government rushed to pass the Video Privacy Protection Act of 1988, officially making it a federal crime to share anyone's video rental history. 32. Breakouts are supposed to involve secret tunnels or smuggled files. Pascal Payet preferred aviation. This French criminal didn't just break out of a maximum security prison once. He did it multiple times using hijacked helicopters. His heavily armed friends would literally hover over the prison courtyard in broad daylight, drop a rope, and yank him to freedom simply because officials completely forgot to put a roof over the recreation yard. It is completely mind-boggling. Thanks to Payet's cinematic flair, the entire French penal system had to legally mandate heavy anti-helicopter wire meshes over every single prison yard. 33. Child actors making millions of dollars used to have absolutely no legal right to their own money. In the 1930s, the incredibly famous child star Jackie Coogan earned an estimated $4 million. When he turned 21, he discovered his mother and stepfather had legally spent every single penny, buying mansions and cars, because California law stated a minor's earnings belonged entirely to the parents. Coogan sued them in 1939. His heartbreaking financial ruin directly caused the creation of the California Child Actors Bill, universally known as the Coogan Act, which legally requires a strict portion of a child's earnings to be locked in a protected trust. 34. The Twinkie defense is arguably the most infamous legal argument in judicial history. In 1978, a man named Dan White committed a highly publicized double assassination in San Francisco. However, his lawyers successfully argued that his massive consumption of sugary junk food, like Twinkies, had severely worsened his depression and diminished his capacity to make rational decisions. He received a shockingly light sentence. The public was so overwhelmingly furious at this specific, absurd legal loophole that California voters successfully passed Proposition 8. This law literally rewrote the state penal code to permanently abolish the diminished capacity defense in criminal trials. 35. A simple, incredibly gross college bet between friends escalated into a literal piece of state legislation. In 1939, a Harvard University student named Lothrop Withington Jr. swallowed a live goldfish in front of a crowd to win $10. The stunt caught on, and suddenly, college students across the entire country were competing to see who could swallow the most live fish. The bizarre, disgusted animal rights groups so profoundly that the Massachusetts state legislature was forced to step in. They explicitly drafted a bill legally banning the cruel and unusual consumption of live aquatic pets, all because one student wanted a quick $10 to show off. 36. Forget everything you think you know about the famous McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit. The media painted Stella Liebeck as a greedy woman who spilled lukewarm coffee and got rich. The horrifying truth? The restaurant was actively holding their coffee at a boiling, near-lethal 190 degrees to save money on free refills. She suffered devastating third-degree burns requiring skin grafts. Her brutal ordeal didn't just win a settlement, it completely terrified the fast food industry. It legally birthed the era of hyper-obvious warning labels and strictly enforced temperature regulations on every single hot beverage served in America. 37. Clothing companies in New York were absolutely baffled in 2014 when they suddenly received aggressive cease and desist letters demanding they stop using basic mathematics on their shirts. A man named Paul Ingressano had somehow managed to convince the United States Patent and Trademark Office to grant him a legal copyright over the mathematical symbol for pi. Armed with his official government paperwork, he tried to sue anyone printing the famous symbol. The Federal Trademark Office realized they had made a spectacularly stupid administrative error. They had to frantically reverse the decision and strictly update their internal review policies to explicitly ensure that nobody can ever legally own a fundamental law of universal geometry. Imagine getting sued just for doing your homework. 38. Faking an emergency on live television for fame is a terrible idea, but a man named Richard Heen pushed it to a criminal level. In 2009, he called authorities claiming his 6-year-old son had floated away in a massive homemade weather balloon, launching a wildly expensive military rescue operation. When it was revealed the boy was simply hiding at home, the public was furious about the massive waste of taxpayer money. This specific high-profile hoax directly motivated Colorado lawmakers to pass House Bill 11-1181. Widely nicknamed the Balloon Boy Bill, it gave prosecutors the legal power to easily demand massive financial restitution from anyone who fakes an emergency. 39. Whipping out a long piece of metal on a high-speed roller coaster is an incredibly stupid way to die. Yet, in 2015, a profoundly reckless tourist decided his social media was worth the risk. While riding the massive California Screamin' Coaster at a Disney park, a man casually extended a massive selfie stick mid-ride to film his own face. Operators spotted the deadly hazard on their monitors and slammed the emergency brakes, stranding dozens of furious passengers high in the air for an hour. Disney executives were so deeply terrified and annoyed by this specific idiot that they immediately passed an ironclad permanent legal policy, completely banning selfie sticks from all their global parks. 40. Picture the scene at a local retail checkout counter. A man is trying to purchase a vacuum cleaner, and he hands the cashier a $1 million bill. In 2011, Michael Fuller confidently walked into a store in North Carolina, handed over a wildly fake banknote featuring an absurdly large string of zeros, and calmly demanded exactly $999,000 in cash change. While it sounds like a bad prank, he genuinely tried to argue its legal tender status to the responding police officers. Because of this spectacularly delusional shopping trip, major retail chains had to actively update their employee training manuals to include explicit instructions on how to legally handle customers attempting to use fictional currency. 41. Copyright law is usually a deeply boring subject, unless the plaintiff happens to be a wildly photogenic macaque. In 2011, a British nature photographer named David Slater left his camera unattended in an Indonesian jungle. A curious monkey named Naruto grabbed the camera and snapped several hilarious, high-quality selfies. When the images went viral, a massive legal battle erupted over who actually owned the rights to the photos. The sheer absurdity of an animal demanding royalties forced the United States Copyright Office to officially update their federal rulebook in 2014. They explicitly added a permanent clause stating that works created by nature, animals, or plants cannot legally be copyrighted. 42. Creating your own currency is a remarkably fast track to federal prison. Bernard von Nothaus learned this the hard way when he started minting silver coins in his garage, dubbing them Liberty Dollars. The crazy part? He actually convinced thousands of real businesses to accept them instead of regular cash. The federal government absolutely panicked, realizing he was successfully running a parallel economy. Because his coins weren't technically counterfeit dollars, but a completely new currency, prosecutors had to legally label him a domestic terrorist just to find a loophole to shut his private mint down. 43. Love is a beautiful thing, even if your soulmate requires AA batteries. In 2009, a Japanese man known only as Sal 9000 donned a white tuxedo and hosted a massive, legally styled wedding ceremony. His bride? A two-dimensional anime character living inside his Nintendo DS console. This wasn't just a quiet basement ceremony. It was a highly publicized event that sparked a deeply serious national debate. It actually resulted in a massive public petition demanding that the government officially recognize marriages between biological humans and fictional animated characters in the legal code. Alright, we have covered 43 mind-boggling points, and there is only one final entry left to complete our list. But before we reveal number 44, it is time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the absolute peak of legal absurdity from today's list goes to Emil Rattleband, the man who tried to legally change his age just to get better dates on Tinder. Suing the government to biologically rewind time is a level of delusional confidence that we honestly have to respect. Do you agree with our verdict? Or did another wild story catch your attention? Let us know in the comments. And now, our final number. 44. How exactly do you sue yourself and expect to get paid? A Virginia prison inmate named Robert Lee Brock figured out the ultimate legal paradox in 1995. While serving a massive sentence, he filed a $5 million civil rights lawsuit against himself, claiming his own religious beliefs were violated when he intentionally got drunk and committed a crime. His absolute genius move was arguing that since he was a ward of the state with zero income, the government was legally obligated to pay the $5 million on his behalf. This logic-breaking attempt forced the legal system to firmly rule that you absolutely cannot sue yourself for taxpayer money. It is terrifying to realize that human stupidity is the greatest driving force behind our legal system. And the scariest part? Someone right now could be the reason for the creation of a new law. What completely normal thing do you think will become illegal in 10 years just because people are foolish? Let us know your wild predictions in the comments. If you enjoyed these absurd legal failures, hit that like button and subscribe for more.